Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome back to the Development Hell podcast and the movie club's back in action. And we have a new member, my friend Kevin. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Shane. I'm ready with my scotch. We just watched a movie about Scotland.
So, Kevin came prepared. I don't know if the rest of us did, and Jim will be here shortly to, I'm sure, bring his history buff angst here because this probably made him very angry. But this is the movie club, and Alex, Vinnie, Kevin, Matt, Joe, and I are here to talk about the Best Picture winning Braveheart, directed by and starring Mel Gibson as William Wallace. And according to this movie, the true hero of Scotland. Is that true? I don't know. Is any of this real? I don't know either. But you know what? This is probably top three dad movies of all time, up there with Gladiator and Maybe the Patriot, also starring Mel Gibson. So we're gonna make a lot of dads happy listening to us talk about Braveheart or Mad, depending on how we feel about it. But let's get things started as we always do. Alex, because you're on the top left to me, would you like to give your basic thoughts on Braveheart and approximate how many times you've seen this movie?
I've probably seen the end of it like more than 20 times because it used to play on AMC over and over again. Like just growing up, from the time I was like in middle school, it was always on. It was always on TV. And all the boys in the neighborhood loved this movie, from the time we were like in second grade. It holds up as a cinematic piece of entertainment. It really does. It is a movie. I mean, the music is fantastic. The romance always gets me. The way the violence is depicted is still, pretty barbaric and brutal. And it's a very satisfying piece of cinema. And it was then and it still is now.
Almost 30 years later. Look at that. How about
Yeah.
you, Vinny?
I really liked it. I'm not a history buff, so I'm not gonna get all bothered about like what's accurate, what's not accurate. I don't even know. I'm not even sure like what the inaccuracies are. So I'm gonna stay away from that. But but yeah, I liked it a lot. It was the first time I saw it, and and you know what? One reason why I enjoyed watching it was because outside of like the occasional historical epic that we still get from Ridley Scott, like these big like 2.5 hour, 3 hour historical epics, like we don't really get that many of them anymore. So it was nice to like go back a few decades and like and watch one that I haven't seen before and and yeah, like one thing I liked about it was like yeah, it's like it really does give you like enough time to like get to know the characters, get to know the setting. Because like if I feel like it was maybe about an hour into it. We didn't get the first like big battle scene until like an hour into it. So I think the movie it was well paced. And then when the big battles do come, they really do like deliver with how intense they are, and then it comes down and gives you more details about like the characters and like the central conflict and yeah, like that was just my general view of it, but I really liked it.
Righty. Kevin, your first time sharing your thoughts on the movie club.
Yeah, so I've seen this movie quite a few times. Uh, for a little bit after I first saw it, I probably considered this my favorite movie for a little while. That changed a little bit as I saw more and learned about the historical inaccuracies that are present in this movie. But one of you said earlier, it's like the movie is presented like a myth, and I think that's a good way to describe it.
Mm.
It's
That
a very, very powerful ending. I'll say that. I enjoy the way this movie ends. A little brutal,
just a little bit.
just a
You
little
know,
bit.
Mel Gibson's only a slightly brutal filmmaker. You're
Right.
only going to see a little bit of blood in his movies.
Yeah, I enjoyed coming back to this one. It was it holds up just as much as it did when I first saw it.
And now Matt, who actually watched it with me, who when he came over and watched it last weekend.
Yeah, this movie, like, it's a crazy satisfying film. It was funny. Earlier today, I was watching that battle scene in Game of Thrones. You remember when Jon Snow is like
Mhm.
fighting? Is it the what's the guy's name? The really terrible guy. The
Ramsey,
one that ends up
Oh, the
getting
one
eaten
that
by the dog.
Ramsey,
Ramsey,
Yeah,
yeah.
the
yeah.
Battle of the
Bolton.
Bastards.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I was watching that and I saw like a behind the scenes clip and they were talking about yeah, like we tried very very hard to hide what was completely computer generated with what was completely actually there. Um, and I feel like I have to imagine like that wasn't the case at all in this movie. Like I have to imagine that like all those people were actually like just like standing, like all those horses, all of the blood splatter, like all of that wasn't like added in post or anything like that. It's like a very interesting like watch because like it feels as gritty as you would want like an epic war scene like to
Mhm.
be. And there's like multiple scenes where like people are just like heads are getting like lopped off. That guy gets owned when he's just like laying in his bed and he gets like stabbed or something like that.
Just swings that
Maced.
ball and chain
It's
down
like
and
the mace or
smashes his
whatever.
face in.
Yeah, it's like that was a wild way to go. It's a really good movie. It's like eating. It's like what you watch when you like just like have a bag of popcorn and you pour a bunch of crunch on the top of it. You just kind of like mix it all together. It's like okay, like this is the specific thing that I need to watch. Like I don't want to think like too hard, but I want to feel something. And like hell yeah, Braveheart.
That should be on the back of like the box when they sell them like 4K.
Right.
It's just like
And,
I specifically to
Braveheart.
watch this film.
Matt needs to get some royalties. Whoever distributes the physical copies of this, just plop that right on there. How about you, Joe?
So yeah, this was the first time that I've seen Braveheart all the way through. Like many of you guys, it was on TV a lot, so I always caught it at the end. So it was weird that I never even really got to see the only scene that I actually got to see was him dying, which is weird because the majority of the film that's like really engaging is, the fight scenes and really watching this person's life. So it's told in the movie. I agree with many people that what everyone's saying. I don't take it as a historical account of the person. I always take it as fantasy in the same way Pocahontas is a cartoon. But the Disney's Pocahontas is a cartoon. Even I'm sure you could argue New World is by Terrence Malick is probably historically inaccurate. Like history in movies is just one of those things that you're never really gonna pinpoint. I don't think we're ever gonna see a perfectly historically accurate movie that's not going to take liberties. Anyways, for what it was, it's very fun. It really captures all the essence of Mel Gibson isms, like when it comes to his directing style, a lot of violence, um, religious overtones, a lot of religious overtones. I'm going to say that twice because it really kind of hammered it in a couple times, even like the ending scene where he's literally crucified. I mean, come on now. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Those are my brief thoughts. We'll probably jump in and talk more.
Well, in terms of like historical inaccuracies, it's funny how we're talking about this and how Hollywood presents historical figures because it reminds me of last year when we watched Amadeus
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about what was true and what wasn't and how pretty much like that movie it was seen through the eyes of Salieri, so it's like
Yeah.
how much is his point of view and how much of this was actually like how much of this actually did happen. While watching Braveheart, I was just thinking about the whole thing with like truth versus fiction and like when talking about historical events and figures in Hollywood movies.
which
And to add to
is
that too, Vinny, like there are brief moments too where like a lot of characters talk about the myth of William Wallace, that it really emphasizes that mythical aspect of who William Wallace is. It is William Wallace, right?
yes.
Okay.
yeah, William Wallace.
It's which like I never thought about this as like a myth told, which that makes a lot of sense, honestly, if you think about it that way. And
Hmm.
I feel like you could take a lot of liberties with things that are like hundreds of years old.
Mhm.
Because let's be real, none of us were there and nobody alive was there. So, like, it's one of those kinds of things where it's like you could take those liberties. It is weird watching things that are about people that are still alive or like
Mm.
people who knew them were still alive and they're taking a lot of historical inaccuracies. But this is probably so I remember my both my dad and my mom had the double VHS of this movie when I was growing
Oh,
up.
remember those?
Yeah, I wasn't so I didn't watch this whole movie until probably when I was a little bit older. You know, I did watch The Godfather when I was 10, but I didn't watch Braveheart. I definitely saw parts of Braveheart when I was a kid, but like I've seen this movie like probably a dozen times at this point. I love this movie. It's one of those movies that's just so thoroughly entertaining
Mhm.
on top of being one Mel Gibson is a really talented director. And the
Yeah.
like I remember listening to him talk about how he was like riding a quad around during all these battle scenes trying to like coordinate everything because this is real. Like this isn't like CGIing a whole bunch of people into a scene and all kinds of stuff like that. It's just like this is coordinating an insane amount of extras
Like
in a whole bunch of scenes
like
in this.
yeah, like, it's legit craftsmanship.
Yep. And also like Mel Gibson's an extremely charismatic actor too. So like he just fits that role of William Wallace, who is very charismatic. And what I find so interesting about the character too is because you would think he's just a brutish, brave kind of guy, but like he's highly intelligent, he's
Hmm.
well educated. Love that moment where he starts talking back to them in French when they think that he can't understand them.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, like those moments, the cast is ridiculous. There's so many great actors in this movie. Like if you start peeling the layers back, all the character actors that are in this movie, it's fantastic. It's so well put together. It's ridiculously well paced for a 3 hour movie. This never feels like 3 hours when I'm watching this movie. And honestly, it's one of the romances that I felt the most like felt like there was really something going on with him and his wife towards the beginning of the film. That was so great. And Alex, I'm glad you brought it up, but the music,
Hmm.
James Horner's music is just incredible. And the cinematography in this movie is ridiculous. Like how they capture the highlands and everything. And
I think it would.
um,
Oh, no,
I
sorry. Go
was
ahead.
I was gonna say Matt can attest. I was doing the whole Leo meme at towards the end of the movie. I'm like, this is one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen in a movie. When
I
he gets his head chopped off and he drops the cloth and it's just his hand up against the sky. I'm just like, chef's kiss. Um,
I think it won the Oscar for cinematography.
it did. I did double check that. And
Did James Horner win for his music?
that's a good question. To the IMDb.
Yeah, great soundtrack.
It's such a great and you know, I think it lost to the what else came out that year? Um, I think it lost to the Postman's score. I think I looked that up and I'm like, I haven't seen the Postman, but I automatically am biased towards it against it in this situation. I'm like, how dare they win that
I
Oscar?
did hear the Postman was Oscar bait from what most people have to say.
Well, and oh, I love about this is because like this would seem like it's Oscar baity, and then you start watching limbs being chopped off and all kinds of stuff like that, and you're just like, holy crap! And like this is the
Did,
perfect melding of like historical drama and action movie because
yeah.
like Matt brought up when he kills one of the other lords and it's just that cannonball on a chain and literally smashes his
Oh
face in
yeah.
bed. I'm just like
Is that the one where he comes where the guy has the dream about him that he's gonna kill him,
Yes.
and it's like, oh, it's just a dream, everything's okay. Boom!
Nope.
I thought that was hilarious. That was fantastic.
But like in a
That
cool way, like not like laughing at it. Like I feel like that's a distinction, right? Because when you're watching
yep.
something and it's like, wow, that looks bad. Like Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, somebody taking a dummy, is like throwing him like across the screen. Like it never looked like that. It actually looked like I remember there's like one part in the battle scene where I think like somebody's taking I don't know some kind of blunt object and like hitting someone over like the head, and like you see like like viscera like pop out of his helmet. Like,
No,
I
it's like
I
so
Brutal.
felt so
crazy.
inclined, right, to see someone smash someone because those helmets look like whack-a-mole helmets, right, guys? It's like those helmets were designed to be smashed like with mallets.
Which also I do want to throw out some historical inaccuracies here just for since we've mentioned this quite a few times at this point. So Scottish people did not wear kilts and wear blue war paint in the same era of time. Apparently,
Oh,
if you saw them wearing blue war paint, they were probably naked with raging erections running
oh,
into battle because that's how apparently they fought at
oh
one point
my.
in time.
with
So
their dicks.
which I thought was hilarious when they started flipping their kilts up and started mooning the British. At one
That's
And
point,
then
probably
someone gets
accurate.
like shot in the butt too. Like
Oh
yeah, that was
yeah.
brutal. Some of those guys took some arrows right in the cheeks and just like,
Ooh.
Still a great scene.
yeah. Which also, prima nocte didn't exist. It
Right.
was like the whole thing where it's like the Lord got to sleep with like the wives when they got married. Apparently, that was indeed in real life something the Scottish made up to use as like a PR thing against the English. And then Mel Gibson's like,
Yeah.
well, that sounds cool. Let's make them despicable and just put it in the movie.
Right.
Um, and I think the best one is, which I even kind of dug the whole William Wallace Princess Isabella thing because Sophie Marceau is I wish she was in more stuff. She only popped up in like she was even a Bond villain in The World Is Not Enough. But
Oh yeah.
fun fact,
Yeah.
William Wallace and Princess Isabella never met. She was also 6 years old when he died.
Right. Right.
So they just mess with
I
time.
had a feeling about that. Like I felt like that romance may, as good as it was, I felt like that was a little bit far reaching because
That was some fan
the
fiction,
connection.
right?
Yeah.
Historical fan fiction right there.
She was
Um,
also still in France when he died.
Correct. Well, yeah, because she was 6, so like she obviously didn't get married off or anything at that point. Also Patrick McCoogan as Longshanks, what a bastard. He's such a great villain in this
Yeah.
movie.
So good.
And also, just a side recommendation if you do want to see a movie that actually focuses on Robert the Bruce, Chris Pine played him in David Mackenzie's The Outlaw King on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
So, side recommendation. Also, there's a sequel to this movie
I heard about that.
that was made like a couple years ago about Robert the Bruce that starred Angus McFadden,
Really?
who played him.
What?
Yep.
What was this movie
But
called?
it wasn't well received, right?
No, I watched it. I thought it was fine. Like it's such a random thing. And let me double check because I think it's just called I'm waiting for IMDb to load. It came out on
Robert the
straight.
Bruce.
Yeah, I think it's literally just that, honestly.
Oh
So the
God.
same
It
actor.
is. Yep, it is still Matthew McFadden, Angus McFadden. Matthew McFadden's from Succession. Um Angus McFadden,
Yes.
and it was just called Robert the Bruce, and it was
Oh
all
God.
right. I was kind of excited when I found out because like I like him as an actor.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he popped up in Lost City of Zed with Charlie Hunnam that I really liked. But in general, there's just, if you get past the historical inaccuracies and stuff like that and just realize, you know what, this is just some historical fiction and a fun time, this is a pretty great movie. And I could
Yeah.
like if I have 3 hours that I could actually spare, I love every second of rewatching this. So I was actually very excited when we picked this because I'm like, well, get to watch Braveheart. We should do Gladiator next.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
It's funny someone mentioned Ripley Scott. I really feel like Ripley Scott was very inspired by this movie
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it almost seems like he picked up a lot of like big
Yeah.
epic 3 hour movies are tough, and the fact that it did it so well and so seamless. And I was at the airport. It passed. I didn't even realize I was waiting that long for my plane. I finished the whole thing
There
just
we go.
straight through.
Which Ridley Scott, like I think it was Vinnie mentioned, is that director that still makes movies like this. And not all of them are great. I think what was it? Gods of Egypt. Not that's a different movie.
That's
Gods
the
and
And
Dark
then
City
Kings.
director.
whatever
Kingdom of
Gods and Kings.
Heaven.
Gods and
Exodus.
Kings. The one with Christian Bale and Joel Edgerton, which that was weird. Joel
The
Edgerton is
Last
like
Kingdom.
Ramses. Christian Bale is Moses. That one wasn't very well received, and I feel like a lot of them you have to watch the director's cut. It's like Kingdom of Heaven is great if you watch the director's cut. The theatrical cut, they cut so much out of the movie that it doesn't feel like a whole movie anymore. And you know, it does take a special kind of director to make something like this work because it is so much work. It's so large scale, and that all the battle scenes in this feel so tactile. Like you could feel everything. And like I grimace every time like James Cosmo's character gets his hand chopped off in that one
Mm,
battle, and like
Yeah.
it's just hand detached and he's just screaming and you're just like just
yeah.
feel all of it. But I know we talked a lot about like the battles and stuff like that, but what are some of the other things in the film that stood out to everybody?
I was gonna make a joke and say Mel Gibson's crazy eyes. I think about that really dumb scene in Daddy's Homes 2 where they talk about his piercing eyes. And there are moments in this film, even with the blue paint, which really emphasize how intense his eyes are.
Yeah.
Not wrong. Which like the thing is, it's like I remember you see the kid that they get to play him earlier in the movie, and he has these piercing blue eyes, and then Mel Gibson shows up like, "Yep, well, they found the right kid." And but Alex, what were some of the things that stuck out to you?
Well, you know, the two things that stick out to me are one, the really the prologue. Is it a prologue? Yes, the prologue of the you're talking about when he's a kid, and his brother and father die. That funeral scene really stands out when she hands him the flower. There's
Oh
something
yeah.
about there's something about that flower that
Yeah.
it almost immediately triggers like a tear in my eye, and then when you see them later when they're adults, really just young adults at that point, they probably would just be teenagers, right? Or maybe
Played by Mel
20, although
Gibson.
Mel Gibson but she still looks very, very young. And there's something about that flower. It was a very, very smart use of an object to kind of elicit, an emotion, because it symbolizes grief. It
Yep.
symbolizes love. It symbolizes something, to build on, in a world where there's a lot of death and tragedy. It symbolizes hope. It could symbolize a bunch of different things. And so that flower is very special. And of course, he gets married to her. He carries that around, like you guys mentioned, that shot, where he's executed and he drops the scarf. Is it a scarf? Or
Yeah.
that's another symbol
The
of,
scarf that his first wife, the scarf that his wife in the beginning gives him.
Yep.
his
Okay.
first wife.
Yeah, you know what? Like
Yeah.
again, this was my first time seeing it, so I really didn't know what was gonna happen in the movie. So like, I was actually surprised when she got killed.
which
Yeah,
also there
yeah,
was a
that
lot
kind
of
of
reserved violence in that scene because you don't see her neck get cut open. But
right.
when they
You
show
see
the
it,
Lord later, it's like,
right. I thought that was very smart to not show hers, but then show his. It's like because you just see it in her eyes,
Mhm.
and it's like, wait.
that's heartbreaking when she's desperately looking around for him, and you're just like,
Oh yeah.
I've seen this
It-
movie how many times, and that still gets me. And I hope that he shows up last minute to save her. It's just like, ah,
yeah, and that gives you as the viewer all of this, like, okay, now I need to see you kill these sons of,
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
it becomes a revenge film at that point in a way, and then it becomes something much bigger than that. So, yeah, but also just the betrayal, of the other lords and them not like believing as hard as he did. That I think that's another thing that kind of stands out, which is also something that ends up breaking his heart later in the film, is just being betrayed by his own people, which um I don't know how accurate that is, but it
Not at
sounds
all. He was not betrayed by any of his people in real life. I was doing a little reading.
oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of people like turning against like other people, I love how I think it's like in the beginning of the second battle scene where the people on the English side are charging the Scottish, and
the
then they like
And the
slow down.
Irish.
Yeah, the
Irish
Irish. Yeah,
people, yeah.
Oh
yeah,
yes, that scene
yeah.
was dope. I
Where
loved
they
it.
go and hold hands, they shake hands.
They're like, "Hey, top of the morning, let's go get drunk."
That was a great scene.
That was
Yeah,
awesome.
that was a great moment. And like there I think the what's interesting is like this film works as like an action film. It's very surprisingly tender with a lot of the things that it
Hmm.
presents with, like Alex, what you were talking about, where you really feel emotionally invested. But it deals with human nature and like geopolitical things in a really interesting way. Like it makes me like sitting there inches like I do like history a lot, so like I'm more inclined to like paying attention that kind of stuff, but it deals with a lot of the historical tensions between the English and the Scottish, which also like Scottish is like a free state, but still part of the UK
Hmm.
today. So like it's still like encompassed under England and the Great Britain. But like this film deals with like people care like politicians caring more about money and power, and just that line from Longshanks where he's just like, then when his guy next to him in that battle scene, Joe, is just like, and what about that one? He's just like, and he folded for much less. And just like it's that's power hungry people. And that was the thing because William Wallace was purely fighting for one, fighting for revenge, but two, fighting for a way of life for his own people. Because
Hmm.
like his line of like, I'd rather die free than live a slave. And that's the life that they were in, where it's just like everything was at the will of the British. But like his whole dynamics, and Robert the Bruce is an interesting character because he's in conflict with like he wants to support William Wallace, but like his father's pressuring him for his own claims. Because I feel like his father, on some levels, thinking more long term, where it's just like
Hmm.
if you really want to make a difference, you need to get this power and stuff like that. And then, of course, the other lords are kind of just like, nope, I want more land and titles, thank you. And they don't want to do the hard work that William Wallace is doing. And the thing is, all the people trust him and not them. But also, Jim's here.
Jimmy,
Hi guys, I made it. Sorry I'm late.
are you done skiing?
No, no skiing today. Dog sitting today.
Ah, I was just talking about specifically like the whole like geopolitical issues that the film takes on, and like the like classism kinds of things between like the lords and then William Wallace and stuff like that.
Yeah, and what struck me kind of about the Lords of Scotland in this movie is that it didn't really look it wasn't apparent just from looking at them from the way they dressed that they were that much better off than anybody else. You know, they were still dirty, they still had grody hair, like they were still meeting at like their council house looked like it was going to start falling down at any second. You know what I mean? Like
They couldn't
unmortared
even have
stone.
weapons. They used rocks.
Um, I think, yeah, if we're gonna get past all the like historical inaccuracies, the that might have something to do with the resonance of the story and maybe why Mel Gibson liked it so much and decided to do it again in America a couple of years later.
What you mean, The
God, he must hate the
Patriot?
British.
He
Which
really hates the
that's funny.
British,
If
yeah,
you watch this and then
among
watch
other
The
groups.
Patriot, there's a lot of parallels.
Good one, Jim. You had to
Yo,
slip that in there.
Jim just
Have you guys
dropping
not talked
bombs,
about Mel Gibson
just
yet? We have to.
I'm very surprised we haven't. I
Uh,
did mention that this movie was not short of religious overtones. There was a lot of, Christian
to be
overtones in
fair,
there.
we haven't said anything negative about Mel Gibson yet.
yeah.
So, which, if you want to tackle that at this point, it's like obviously Mel Gibson is a very talented actor, a very talented director, and
He's a
not a
complete
great
maniac.
person.
He's a complete maniac as a
Yeah.
director. Did you guys get to watch any of the behind the scenes stuff?
No.
I've seen I've seen specifically from this movie. Like I haven't seen Apocalypto and I've seen Hacksaw
I did see
Ridge,
that.
but
movie.
I remember seeing a behind the scenes clip. I loved this movie as a kid. I think it was like my first R-rated film. Um, it's really violent, but I remember seeing a behind the scenes clip of him in his kilt with his sword, that ridiculously huge sword, running up and down the lines, like directing this group, directing that group, like just completely out of his. I don't know where he gets all the energy from, but like I'm sure he's got, you know, a lot to deal with in his own life. But the only thing that I know he did was that DUI, and then he called the cops some kind of a slur. But there could be a dozen other offenses that I don't know about.
I
There's quite a few.
so obviously when he got arrested and said like the Jews are like destroying the world and stuff like that and run everything, it's like that was really bad.
Uncalled for.
But
The-
that phone call that they had recorded of him to his wife,
Oh wow, I forgot all about
that was
that.
the nail in the
Yeah.
coffin.
who
I
said
know
that
full-on
he
white
wishes
supremacist.
got
Who wants to give me the summary? Because
so
I don't know anything about this.
the main takeaway of the message is he said that he wished that his wife got raped by a pack of
People,
And
bad
yes,
certain
Right.
people.
yeah, certain race of people.
Ah,
So and using a derogatory N word. So that was fun. That's the one that like I was like
thanks for
that's
clarifying,
bad.
Shane. Well, he
Like,
was
real
untouchable
bad.
for a couple of years in Hollywood there, but I know he's done some work recently.
Well, because the thing is,
Right.
well, and he got nominated for an Oscar. So,
Exactly.
and which
Yeah,
is
for
why cancel culture doesn't exist. But like,
he got a best director nomination for
Hacksaw Ridge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I still haven't seen that.
which that was so awkward watching the Hollywood Reporter roundtable for that, and the way Denzel Washington was staring him down the whole entire time. Because like you could tell Mel Gibson was there wanting to like engage with people, and like Denzel Washington was there for fences, and he's just looking at him like, I don't want anything to do with this man. Which
I wouldn't blame
blame
him.
him. So like
I wouldn't blame him.
Kind of
well,
fair.
well, the thing is, it's like Mel Gibson's very good friends with Robert Downey Jr., Jodie Foster, and Shane Black. And Robert Downey Jr. kept pushing for people to give him a second chance after he got a second chance for all the drug stuff that he was caught up in. And then Jodie Foster cast him in The Beaver, which I think is a pretty underrated little film where he plays a man dealing with a lot of mental health issues and starts like coping with using like a beaver puppet to like interact with people through. And like
Oh,
Jodie
yeah.
Foster directed that. and cast him in it. And then slowly he started getting like villain roles because like those were easy, like
Damn
in
crazy eyes.
Machete Kills and Expendables 3,
and
which
and Daddy's Home too.
was he a villain in that?
Oh,
Yeah,
no, I'm sorry. He wasn't a
Well,
villain,
yeah,
but
and now he's back to like he was in because like I'm a fan of S. Craig Zahler, who does like very like exploitation kinds of old school films like Bone Tomahawk, and him and Vince Vaughn were in Dragged Across Concrete, which is a interesting like look at like police force and stuff like that. And like Mel Gibson's probably playing a character that he could relate with a bit. And it is a dirty cop. But the thing is, it's like it's an interesting thing to where like Mel Gibson was a huge star for a long time, came out of nowhere with Mad Max in the late 70s, and then became a big star because of that, and then got Lethal Weapon, which he may or may not still be directing Lethal Weapon 5 for Warner Brothers because I don't know if they canceled that. I would be shocked if they didn't. They canceled so many other things at this point. But like he was on top of the world. Like Passion of
what?
the Christ was like the highest grossing R-rated film in the history of cinema.
And
And then
and then he had the starring role in Signs a couple years before that, and
yeah,
he was really good in that.
Yes.
so it's an interesting case, and I think Mel Gibson's one of the strongest cases of like as a person, are you able to take a step back and like take a step back and realize like I can appreciate somebody's art and think they're a piece of crap versus like can you not? And there's a lot of people on both sides of that conversation.
Yeah.
And I feel like Mel Gibson's a really easy measure for that because like it's very obvious he did some really bad things and has some really bad thoughts about different kinds of people. And it's one of those kinds of things. And I also think he's one of the perfect examples showing why cancel culture doesn't really exist. People have way too short of a memory to just let people just bury and disappear forever because like he's still working. He's still regularly working. And I think the moment he got nominated for Hacksaw Ridge for Best Director, I'm like, well, no, like nobody of power really cares anymore in Hollywood. So Mel Gibson's back. So
Without
Reset the
devolving
clock.
into a discussion of Tar instead, how many of you guys saw Tar?
Not
I
yet.
have.
yep.
Haven't heard
Okay,
of it.
maybe we'll hold that one on for a later
Lydia
date.
Tarr's going to be
Is that a Mel
back
Gibson movie?
conducting within like a couple years after the end of that movie.
Oh, I was gonna say I heard, and this was a long time ago. So again, young James saw this movie against the wishes of my parents. I think he got a pass, but through the censorship board in my house because he was so outspokenly Catholic, and I grew up in a Catholic house. So yeah, speaking, who said something about the religious imagery in this movie? It's
Joe
Yeah,
Mann.
I
really
did.
heavy-handed. I didn't even
Really
know
heavy.
when this time watching the movie, yeah, it's really, really heavy-handed with him riding the donkey in with the shawl over his head and the Jesus Christ pose and the whole thing. It's very, very, very much religious. But I was really excited when I heard he was going to make a Viking flick with Leonardo DiCaprio. Do you guys remember hearing anything about this? And
No.
Oh,
No.
got wind of him being
how long ago was this?
a long time ago. It must have been probably aughts, probably 2000s, I think it was. There was a pause after, like maybe after Signs, I don't know, but I think Mel Gibson wanted to direct this movie. It's like going to be a historical epic, kind of like Braveheart, but Vikings. And I wonder if Leo kind of has a good sense of character and was like, I'm going to steer clear of this guy because I don't want to be caught on any of the
What?
bullshit that's going on, with him.
Well, we also ended up getting Braveheart with Vikings last year with the Northmen.
yeah.
Yes.
Which was a great movie.
Mhm. Which Robert Eggers definitely has the historical like backing to be able to make a historical epic feel genuine
Yeah.
and lived in, because like he's an actual historian and like he cares a lot about being historically accurate with his films. And I think that's why he's so inclined to make folk horror films like The
I
Witch and
wonder,
The Lighthouse and
like
stuff like that.
it'll be like not to go off on a tangent, but it'll be interesting to see how he works that into his Nosferatu remake.
Oh,
Mm.
Nosferatu.
Mm.
See, now I made a SpongeBob reference. You're welcome, everybody.
Nosferatu.
But I do want to say this cast is ridiculous. Like there's so many talented people in here, and
Brian Cox.
obviously, hmm?
Brian Cox
Yeah, who rolls up? It's like
on a
I'm
horse.
Argyle, I'm your uncle. It just shows up for like 2 minutes,
He's
and
amazing.
it's just like
And
you
Brendan
know you have
Gleeson.
an amazing cast when you could just have Brian Cox in a movie for 2 minutes and you almost forget he was in it.
Has he been like 50 for like 30 years?
I
would
thinking
say,
the
I would
same
argue,
thing.
I would argue that he did look younger in Manhunter by like 10 years.
But
That's
that was
it.
like 1985, Joe.
So
So
he
But
like
he
was
still looked old then, but not like he looked 40 versus 50. He was probably 30.
Every time someone mentions Brian Cox, I always think of the scene in adaptation when he's giving that screenwriting presentation and he just like obliterates Charlie Kaufman's
oh, yeah,
character.
yeah, yeah. Good in that.
well, when you can do things like that and get really talented character actors to pop up in key small roles, you're doing something right. Like
Mhm.
Patrick McCoogan, who I've seen in a few things, is perfect as King Edward. Angus McFadden, who's young up and coming Scottish actor at that point. You have the likes of like James Cosmo, who went on to do things like Game of Thrones and Troy. Speaking of Brian Cox, also in
Oh
Troy.
yeah, he was in that. I forgot.
Like I love the fact that somebody like Peter Mullen, who's probably in one of his earlier film, this is probably an early film for him, is just that one random regular soldier that they always keep going back to whenever they want to see like a soldier's perspective. He's like, "We're gonna go home," and he's a really talented actor who's popped up in things like Children of Men and War Horse, and he's in the Lord of the Rings show. And there's a bunch of people like I know I was watching this with Matt, and Alan Armstrong, who played Mornay, one of the lords, is in Breeders with like Martin Friedman plays his dad in it. And
Great
of
show.
course,
Great show.
Brendan Gleeson just showing up here as Hamish. I love him in this movie. It's just I'm gonna squash her like a worm, and that whole rock throwing thing was perfect. Tommy Flanagan, who's in this, he's in Gladiator. I feel like he's in any kind of movie like this. He's
I
the
think
one
that
who
was his first role ever, if I'm not mistaken.
he's the one who gets
Wow.
married at the beginning of the film, and then boy does he get revenge and beats that guy to death. Um, like a couple of scenes later. I think Catherine McCormick does a great job as Morin, his wife, and just there's so many, like even like Michael Byrne, who's that piece of shit that like molests his wife towards the beginning of the film. He's in, he's the main Nazi guy in Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade,
Oh, that's right.
and
Yeah.
there's just so many actors like that in here that are just great character actors just
Really
plopped
good.
in.
Yeah.
Um, and like I mentioned before, I really like Sophie Marco, who I don't think popped up in a whole lot of things post like early 2000s. I feel like she kind of peaked with this and then um was with Pierce Brosnan in World's Not Enough. That's crazy that that came out in 1999. That makes me
Right.
but just in general, like who are some of the actors that really stuck out to all of you?
Gleason was the one that really stuck out to me. I'm surprised you didn't mention that his defining character trait is that he gets along by punching you in the face. Hi, how you doing? Bam. 3 times in the movie that character's punching people in the face is be like, nice to meet you. It's Hamish.
Because he's a fun time.
100%. That's
I've always
meta
been a
right there.
fan of Steven, but I'm scrolling through the cast now and I don't know the actor's name of
I was
Steven
trying
the
to,
Mad Irishman.
yeah, because
Oh
David
yeah.
O'Hara.
yeah,
David
because
O'Hara.
because I mentioned before he's in The Departed. He's in
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, because
Yeah.
he's one of the two guys outside. Is like, are you a cop?
You
And it's
call.
like,
Oh,
if
right. Yeah,
you're
right.
not paying attention to us, you're a cop.
That's good.
She
Man,
didn't pay
And
attention to us.
I
She's a
never
cop.
ironically,
realized that
he's
was
one of the
him.
few Scottish actors in the movie, and he's playing an Irishman. I appreciate that.
Well,
That's
yeah,
really
because like Brendan Gleeson's very obviously Irish playing the Scotsman in
yeah.
this. But, you
Hmm.
know, this whole entire, like I said, this whole entire cast is fantastic. And everybody plays their roles really well. Um, and you know, this is such an entertaining film. There's one thing that I don't like the handling of in this film, and I think it kind of tips the hand of some prejudice behind who made the film is how they deal with gay people in this movie
Mm.
Oh
because they
yeah.
make them the butt of jokes in the movie instead of them because like at this point in time probably weren't too happy if you're a king and you have lineage and it's like your son's gay. But the thing is, like, you can tell that they treat those characters in a way that it's like we're supposed to be laughing at them.
Right. Right.
And it's not great. That's probably one of the things that aged the worst for me watching this movie. And it's just like not great. And also the prince is just a complete caricature
I
and like
agree.
a really
Yeah.
uninteresting character.
He was probably the weakest character in the movie for me.
And
The whole thing with the prince and his lover, I thought was weird when I first saw it. I still thought that rewatching it now.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's just like and that was probably one of the most obnoxiously brutal moments in the movie is where he just yeets that guy right out the window and you're just like
That being said, Longshanks was probably the standout for me in this movie. I really like how they made him just a pure evil villain.
Yeah.
he like I don't know how King Edward the First was it as an actual leader.
Oh, he was pretty rough.
Yeah, but like he is like pure evil in this movie. And I
Oh,
love
damn.
how McCoogan plays it so nonchalantly judgmental and just like the one moment it's just like, but father, it would take this long for them to all get there. It's like, well, that's why I sent them before I sent your wife. And it just so like he
Right.
just felt like he was playing it so deliciously evil. And
Yeah.
it's just like he was so much fun to watch on screen.
Right. But he's also, I mean, he's doing it like he's playing chess, like
Mhm.
he's
Yes.
just playing a chess game. It's like another day at the office for him. Like that's the other thing about him that's so scary. It's just like, like the thing with the arrows. Won't we hit our men?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll hit theirs too,
We have
attack.
reserves.
Like, yeah, we have
Arrows
exactly.
cost money. It's just like, wow. Apparently, arrows cost more money than humans to hire into your army, which that is one of those like small moments that really captures like the value of humanity when it comes to like that kind of overbearing like monarch where it's just like yeah I'd rather save arrows than actual soldiers so just like yeah goodbye.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's just moving pieces on a board. It's so
Well, the thing is like the how long did the English Empire rule so much of the world and how many rebellions did they quell? It
A
was just
lot.
like a lot. And it kind of probably was just like this is another day at the office. What another stupid Scotsman thinks that they're gonna do something. And it's
right.
just like
Yeah.
he played that perfectly. And like You Oh, and this is probably one of the most ridiculous, like, fantasized moments in the movie where he's lying dying, and the princess is just like, I'm basically gonna have William Wallace's child, not your baby, and
Yeah.
like your descendant. He's like, "Argh," and just like dies. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh,
Love that
dies
scene.
at the same time as William Wallace. Obviously, that couldn't have happened in real life.
He
Right.
died
Which,
2 years later.
Yep.
thank you, Kevin.
Setting up the drama.
Kevin's got the true story here,
I think
but
that's
also,
I don't know how well that ages for me. The idea that, well, we know they're never together, but that they had to like put that in there, like the Wallace seed carries on. It's
yeah,
like,
Sequel.
gotta have a sequel. 30 years later, their child finally takes down England.
he speaks
Um,
French, he does backflips, he has a lightsaber.
but you know what? Best final word of a character before they die. Something that I quoted every time I left Corner Bakery Cafe when I worked there. Freedom! I just love that moment because, like, it's so uncomfortably unnerving to think about what they're doing to him at that moment. Because, like, you have no idea exactly what they're doing, but boy, can your mind run away with exactly what they're doing to his body. But him just screaming freedom, that's just such a, like, ugh, moment. And then, of course, at the very end, where Hamish yeets his broadsword out, sticks it in the ground, and they'll start charging at the British. It's just like, yeah, I feel pumped.
I think rousing was, yeah, a good
Yup.
adjective I saw in one of the reviews. That pretty much sums this one up. What were you going to say,
Very
Vinny?
rousing.
No, I wasn't gonna say anything.
I wonder how much he tried to get away with showing, because we all know how much Mel Gibson loves violence and loves
Yep.
putting violence on screen and loves putting torturous violence on screen. Like, how
Made a whole
much of
movie of
that
it.
dismemberment did he try to put on film? What did you say, Kevin?
He made a whole movie about killing Jesus.
Very slowly and very
It's
bloody.
like of all the stations, he's like, why are we so fixated on that one station of the cross where he's getting tortured? Like, there's a whole 13 stations, but that's the one he's really fixated on.
right. Well, I think that's the thing. The story we can get to that, but the story of Jesus is one of compassion and social justice. And there's and all these other things. It's a very complex story, but the emphasis gets put on the violence because it's a movie and it's an American movie,
Yep.
and we like our violence.
I, I agree with what Jim said earlier. I was also brought up from a Catholic household, and there was like a movie we got away with watching. But going what you're saying too, Alex, I can't get into it with just how much violence is in it. At some point, maybe we're desensitized to it, like you said, in American culture. But honestly, that type with that subject matter, it actually makes me cringe. I
Well,
can't watch Passion of the
yeah,
Christ.
because in that sense, it was just torture. Like you said, it was torturous. It was just torturous, and it's torturous to watch.
Well, and I think there's a big distinction too in filmmaking between action and violence.
Mhm.
Because Braveheart's action.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Braveheart's an action movie. There's definitely moments like every time they're fighting in battle and you see people's heads getting chopped off and limbs getting chopped off, it's like action. With violence. But the thing is, it's like Passion of the Christ is just violence.
Yeah.
There's no thrill about it. It's just brutal. And Jim, you weren't here when I mentioned before. I don't think you were here when I mentioned before about like how he strategically doesn't show the wife getting her throat slit, but boy, do they brutally show that Lord getting his. I think that's why they don't show William Wallace getting brutalized like that. I feel like at least in this movie, there's specific restraint that he shows for certain characters to not show that kind of violence being perpetrated upon them. But like obviously threw that out the window, he made Passion of the Christ and just decided to make torture porn about Jesus. Which that movie made a lot of money. All those
Yeah.
All the Catholic people went out droves to go see Passion of the Christ. But like this this movie, I think there's specific moments and I think specific characters that he's like, I'm not going to show that. And I think it says very specifically like what characters he wants to highlight and protect on screen in this movie. And God, I think they would that scene would have been ruined at the end if they actually showed him being like gutted and like having his genitals chopped off and all kinds of stuff like that.
That it's. I mean, yeah, it's like technically a violent scene, but it's also supposed to be like it's also supposed to be somber because
Yeah.
he is dying for what he believes in, and I think if Mel Gibson had shown a more brutal depiction of it, it would have taken away it would have taken away from like how emotional that scene was was feeling.
I like that, yeah,
100%.
because like the subject isn't the violence, the subject is
It's
the death.
what he stood for.
Yeah, and also kind of like if that's like the end of the movie and that's your main character, like you don't want the lasting thought, like the lasting image of him is kind of like him holding on to like his wife until like his dying breath, not like him getting gutted, which is which is really nice. Um, and also like that kind of parallels like his wife also like dying. Like you want to focus on kind of like just her as a character, and maybe kind of like the tragedy, like the look on her face that you were talking about, Shane, earlier, but not necessarily like the death itself with her, like the act of killing her, basically. Because if that's the point, and that kind of like that's like a horror movie. Like when you go into movies and you're looking for like the kills. So this was
Right.
pretty. But yeah, but
Right.
then like out of the window is Passion of the Christ, which makes me nauseous. Also,
Yes.
didn't like an old lady die in the theater? Was that a myth?
I no, I think she passed out, but I don't think she died.
Oh, okay.
Trust me, I've actually passed out watching a movie before because how like gruesome it was. 127 hours.
Oh,
Yeah,
Watching a
that's
man
a
chop his
hard
own
movie
arm
to
off made
watch.
me pass out. In
That's a hard
film
movie
Ooh.
club,
to watch.
Vinny, I don't think you were at that meeting, but like I was sitting in the front row and I was watching the movie like this, and I literally passed out like this so nobody noticed because my hands didn't drop or my
Oh
head.
my
And
gosh.
then I came to and I was drenched head to toe, and I'm just like,
Damn.
it actually made me pass out because I can't handle shit like that.
yeah.
Like I could barely watch the Evil Dead Rise trailer that's out right now. I'm like, how the hell am I gonna sit through this movie? But like there's just certain things where it's like I haven't seen Passion of the Christ and I haven't seen Apocalypto, but I've seen this and I've seen Hacksaw Ridge. And
Are these the only four movies he's directed?
I think he had some like smaller films that weren't like big epic type movies. Here, let me fact check. So
Apocalypto is
director,
wild, by the way. Apocalypto is like actually wild. Like it's
Yeah.
actually
Well,
violent. Like
yeah,
he
yeah.
directed The Man Without a Face 2 years before this, which was a drama about a man who looks like half of his face is burned.
Oh, okay. I think I saw part of that.
Me too.
Yeah,
So that was
yeah.
his directorial debut, but then it was just Braveheart, Passion of the Christ, Apocalypto, Hacksaw Ridge, and he has Passion of the Christ, Resurrection coming out. So
What?
about the resurrection of Christ
Oh, okay.
coming out in 2024,
Nice
this
sequel.
time it's
I'm
personal.
worried.
and
This time
Lethal
is
Weapon
personal.
5 is still in pre-production. They haven't killed it yet. Because Richard Donner was supposed to direct it, but then he passed away, and then they shifted directing to Mel Gibson. But so he does have Passion of the Christ Resurrection coming out next year.
How is he going to bring violence into that film? I wonder. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued.
He's gonna come back for
Jim,
vengeance and kill
Jim,
all the Romans.
I mean,
flashback.
I feel like I'll be able to handle Hacksaw Ridge, but I'll never watch The Passion or Apocalypto.
Apocalypto, what I haven't seen it. It's been a while, but Matt, when
Well,
you say like you said like you mean like people actually got hurt on the filming? Is that
No, like the like in the movie itself, like you see like gore and
Parts
violence.
cut out.
yeah,
People like
yeah,
throwing spears. I think like a baby is like given birth to like on screen. Like
yes,
it's like
that was crazy.
yeah. I mean, like there's only so much I can take, but like obviously I heard everything that went into The Passion, and then with Apocalypto, I mean, like just like the stuff that I've heard about that's shown in it, like I can't,
But
I
it's a
can't, I
good
can't.
like it's a good like tense adventure movie. Like I just remember being like on the edge of my seat like with that one. It was pretty well. It was just well directed. That's all.
I
I
do
liked
to
it.
do with
Great.
the Mayans, right?
Yep.
Yep. Oh, the Aztecs. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
Aztecs
Aztecs.
that took over Mayans because the
Okay.
Aztecs were the ones that were like kind of like the conquerors in the in the Mexican region.
Oh, that's right. Okay. There's good natives and bad natives. Kind of
Yeah, and the
like
Aztecs.
according
Wait.
to Mel Gibson.
right, kind of like Dances with Wolves, right?
That's one of my reservations about watching Apocalypto is like, why'd Mel Gibson make a movie about a bunch of indigenous people in like Central and South America? Like, I get his other movies, but why that?
Hey
Well,
And
Shane.
Joe, it's
it-
about money.
not only that, Shane. The twist at the end is there's a plot twist to Apocalypto. Guess who shows up at the end?
Jesus,
Jesus.
The white Christians with the big crosses too.
I
Coming
was
in
gonna
their big
say,
boats.
so I was only joking, but then missionaries show up, so that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Because what did they
There you
come
go.
in and civilize them?
No, like there's like three natives that
That's what
like
they
see
call
them
it.
coming in on the shore, and they're just like kneeling down, like, "Oh, this is the end." Like it's so weird. It's so weird.
Well, where's that scene?
I just remember the scene with the jaguar in that movie. It's like so obviously a stuffed animal that it like evokes immediate laugh out loud. It just takes you right out of the movie. I remember liking that movie though. I do remember enjoying it.
I haven't seen it because it's not. Well, when I was trying to find it, it wasn't anywhere. So I don't know if it's streaming anywhere at this point, but maybe some point. But does anybody have any last minute comments, things that they want to bring about Braveheart?
Just a shout out to James Horner, I think. Did you guys mention soundtrack yet? I
Mhm.
Well, you know
love the
what?
oh,
soundtrack.
We could
yeah.
always throw out extra shout outs to James Horner because
The
Yeah.
music, you like the music.
so great.
Honestly, without that music, I don't know. It wouldn't be the same movie.
No.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Great shout out to the whole cast, really. They all played their roles well, even though some of the roles were questionable.
Yeah.
You know, in regards to historical accuracy, I love to hate the villains, and I was rooting for the Scots the whole movie.
There you go.
Some of the Scots were a bunch of bastards.
Yeah,
those rich, quote unquote, rich Scots.
Rich.
Only as rich as the British will let them be rich. But anyway, so that was Braveheart. Like I said, one of the probably top 3 best dad movies out there. And maybe we'll cover the rest of them by covering Gladiator at some point. But what we will be covering next month will be When Harry Met Sally. So, and now for something completely different.
Yes.
Now I want to watch it. Oh, I want to do a Monty Python. Now I just got myself excited for something completely different. But yes, we're going to be covering Rob Reiner's rom-com, which is it the greatest rom-com? We'll have to have that discussion next month. But from Alex, from Vinny, from Jim, from Matt, from Joe, and our newest addition, Kevin, and myself, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Development Hell podcast.